Let's try and talk about the forms, about the so-called flow. I have no idea where this is going. Quite honestly, I'm just going to be improvising. I don't know where to even begin, but maybe somehow this will all come together. So I've gathered some references, right? This is something that we've seen. This is Carlos Huente, and this is Michelangelo, but let's get let's look at this image first as well. So this is the clothing reference that I've gathered. So this is Michelangelo, hello, and this is a bunch of trees. And so what all of those have in common is a so-called, I guess, flow. I do have a problem with that because it doesn't really say anything. It's some kind of way of things flowing, right? Which doesn't really mean anything. You kind of get a feel of that. That's just the way it is. You get a feel of a flow. So here the flow is very clear. God, it feels like I'm talking about some kind of I don't know, some kind of superpower, some kind of extra entity inside. I don't know, it's just weird to call it flow, right? You just get a feeling of things working, right? Of things being in some kind of a harmony. So here everything is just, well, I have to use it again, flowing, right? Things are just bending in some very, I don't want to say natural, but very elegant way. They don't make our brains stuck, right? We don't look at it and start thinking about something. We just get a feeling immediately. Just by looking at this, immediately there's some kind of feel of harmony. Same for this guy, for example. Here everything is just blending, it's just merging, right? Everything is just nice and clean and all of that. Even those things, whatever they are, at the top, it looks like they're breaking something, right? Because everything, for example, here goes horizontally, but then all of a sudden there's just a vertical shapes right in the middle of the shoulder, something that we don't see on a human being, even though everything is here is kind of like a human being, right? But it doesn't break it. It's just something that adds it, and it has its own, I don't want to say language, but it has some kind of life, right? But at the same time, it considers the life outside of it, and so they in some kind of unity. And like I said, I have no idea where I'm going with this. I'm just trying to show something that is, I guess, key when it comes to just organic life, I suppose, or just presenting organic life, because everything that we see here is also visible in here, right? So at first I was thinking, when I was just thinking about this whole subject, and a couple of times I tried explaining it, and the thing was that I was explaining it on an asset that was a tree. So the natural way to explain how things should work on a tree is to gather some tree references. But when I started to think a little bit deeper about that, what I realized is that the key, at least that's what it seems to me, the key to understanding how to make a tree is not gather tree references. I mean, it will certainly help, but the things that happen to the tree are pretty much the same things that Carlos Huente is doing. It's kind of the same thing that clothing is doing. Some of this stuff, right? Some of the things that we do see here, right? It's somewhat the same as the tree. I know this is quite a stretch, but let's just continue. I guess the thing that I was thinking about is that in order to learn to do a good sculpture, a good organic sculpture, we need to gather some references from nature, right? Because we are doing something that is based in nature, so it's a natural thing for us to just go and look for references in nature. I no longer believe that's the case. I don't believe that, for example, Carlos Huente was observing trees to make something like that. some of it is definitely played a role. Some of it subconsciously probably just gets through, right? And we remember something like that. But I personally never studied trees, even though I've made them as assets, right? As some kind of well, not some kind of, but as 3D models. But still, while executing those trees, I was already doing something that a tree naturally does. And I think this is just something that we have inside. I think we, being part of nature, I think we just strive for something that nature does all the time. We strive for some kind of structure like that, for some kind of elegancy, for some kind of, here it comes again, flow, right? So look at this tree. This is it's the oldest tree on the planet. At least that's what it's called. Well, if you Google that, you will get this tree, right? It doesn't even look like a tree. It's just crazy looking. But despite being crazy looking, all of the things that we see here, all of the forms, all of the lines, they are very clean. That's the thing about that as well. Nothing here breaks. Just look at this. This is probably my favorite part of this whole thing. Just look how elegant that is. There is no wobbliness. Well, there's plenty of wobbliness, but there's no shakiness, right? There's no noise. It is some natural progression of lines. Yes, they're bending. Yes, they're turning. They're curving and all of that, but they are just... it feels like some kind of a river, right? Something like that. It feels like the whole planet is just almost doing those things. Whatever the things have growth, right? Even the rivers, if they're growing or if they're flowing, if they're moving, all of those things, they follow some kind of a rule, some kind of a thing about them. They just that can be seen and can be observed everywhere. So here, for example, those branches, right? The shapes of those things, the way they grow. It's kind of what Carlos Huende is doing here, right? This whole shape in here, it's not exactly a snake. I mean, it is a snake in some sense. We can get the reference of snakes and perhaps use that to make a tentacle. But I would argue we can do the same thing by looking at this, right? It's the same thing. Snake or a tree branch, it's kind of the same thing. And Michelangelo, yeah, obviously the master of the masters, in my opinion. It's everywhere here as well, and it just, in his case, the way he was creating this surface, and this is his paintings, right? If you look at the sculptures, his sculptures are more of that, right? They're still, well, not as bumpy, and I don't really want to use that word bumpy, because we do see some bumps, right? Like here, for example, there's a bump, but it's just the way he renders the surface. But it's still, if I look at a tree, it's kind of that, right? Somewhat like that. I mean, here we have some bumps even here, right? It's still following the same structure. It's still elegant. It's still clean. Especially this guy, right? It's just amazing. And if you look, if you see his work, especially the Pietà, those 3 versions that I was lucky to see when I was in Florence, they were in the same museum. They were in the same room. When you can just look at what this genius went through, right? His just progression. The second Pietà is this, but the last one that he hadn't finished, it's just pure elegant form, just growing from I don't know what, and just somehow turns into cosmos. It's just impossible to explain. You need to see that, right? But it still somehow follows the same rules, the same things about the organic matter, about the organic life. And so even clothing has the same thing, apart from just the ones that we make, well, the kind of the accessories, I suppose, right? Or just the design choices that we make, the flow of things here, the folds, right? This kind of shapes, right? All of that is still the same thing. If you enjoy this content or find it useful, please consider supporting me by buying me a cup of coffee via the link in the description. It's as if we, in order to make clothing, we can look at something else. We can look at a tree. We can look at whatever has the organic life in it, right? It's all translatable, but there's just one thing about it all of that. It's that thing of harmony and the so-called flow, right? That nothing just breaks, everything works in harmony, everything just creates some kind of a unity. And so if we look at some examples in 3D space, this is a real person and this is not, right? And I've already mentioned, talked about what this piece is lacking. But the other thing, well, not the other thing, but the thing that this piece does have, it does have the organic structure, because everything here, in terms of the kind of cleanliness and elegancy, right? It's kind of here. I mean, we don't see any strange breakups. Things are quite nice and fleshy, and I've mentioned that as well, that it's not that the skill of execution is lacking here, something else is lacking here, and well, the head is lacking the execution. Actually, now that I look at it, it's just a bit too boxy, right? But it doesn't matter if we compare that with a real person. There's just more, I don't want to say variety, but it's more dynamic, right? It's not so flat as what we see here. Everything here is just too simplified, even though things are in some way flowing, things are in some sense connecting, but there's just it's just too simple. It's just way too simple. Here everything is of a different I don't want to say level, because it's just it's a real person, but something else is happening here. And I was as I was thinking about the subject, I've made some changes to this guy, and well, I just wanted to see what can be improved, like where would I even begin improving something like that. And what I realized, well, first of all, I've just removed the situations, and that made the whole thing just immediately better to be. But I was just with the move brush, right? Nothing but the move brush. I've started to just move things this way, and by just following some kind of obviously there is a knowledge of anatomy in here, at least some kind of a knowledge of anatomy in here, but breaking the monotony of just flatness, trying to create something a little bit more dynamic, something that we see here, right? The silhouettes, the shapes, all of that stuff, right? all of this stuff, which is the same, all of that is the same, all of this stuff, right? Look at the silhouettes, look at the shapes, look at what they're doing, look just how many there are, right, of those shapes, but they're not turning in some kind of chaos. And so I was just playing with this, and just I wanted to see where this would lead me. And I mean, this is just a quick test, right? But still, it did improve things, in my opinion, just by using the move brush, right? Just by adjusting some of the shapes, some of the forms. And so this is the result, and I don't even know where I'm going with this, what this is supposed to show you or tell you or give you some kind of insight in whatever it is that I'm trying to say here. But to get back to the reference, I guess there are two things as well that we can make out of all of the things that I've myself personally just realized, or some kind of I guess takeaways, is that shapes are, in general, they are somewhat bigger, they're somewhat more voluminous, but at the same time they are more tight, right? So again, just to compare that with a real person, so there's more volume in the muscles in here, and at the same time they are tighter. They just there's this sharpness between the different surfaces. Here we don't really get this tightness, even though we see separation of the surfaces. It's just the separation. It's not exactly the tightness. It's just flat, even though there's so many lines, right? We're using this material, we can analyze things. There's just so many lines, but it's lacking the tightness and it's lacking the volume at the same time. Just comparing that with that, right? We see darker lines in here, which means that there are deeper cuts in here compared to this guy, with everything is just more or less the same variation of gray, right? And there's more highlights in here as well. And so perhaps it's not so much the anatomy that we need to be learning so much, right? All those courses on anatomy, they are very valuable. I mean, without anatomy, I wouldn't be able to do anything that I'm doing. Like all of the things, all of the models that I've done personally, all of that is well, I mean, the quality of those things is because of the anatomy, because of the classes that I've taken and all of that. But the other thing to think about, and perhaps this is even more important in some sense, it's the connection of things, right? It's the shapes of things. It's the way they create a unity, they create oneness. And as I say this, an example comes to my head by Scott Eaton, whose classes I did take for the anatomy. I don't remember the artist that he mentioned in there, but the artist was using just the silhouettes to create to kind of practice, right? To practice anatomy. So there was nothing within the silhouettes, but the silhouettes would go, well, somewhere up to here perhaps, right? So we can still make out the arms. We would still be able to see that, but without the highlights, without the shadows, we would just see the kind of the bumpiness, right, of it, the shapes of things, kind of loosely done. But that is probably very, very helpful. That's probably what will get us to the point where things are just a little bit more connected, where things just a little bit more unified. Things like we see perhaps somewhere here, right? Just silhouettes of shapes, right? Not necessarily anatomy, not necessarily what we see here, but just lines that create the volume, that create those kind of shapes. So I don't know, what is the recommendation here? Like, how do you improve something? Do you study trees? Do you study clothing? Do you study Michelangelo, right? Do you study Carlos Huente? The answer is probably you study all of that. And when we get to study all of that and we get to compare all of that, I think that's when we get the synthesis, right? That's when we get what is important, what makes organic surface look the way it does. And my takeaways are the ones that I've mentioned, the so-called flow, or just the feeling that we get of things just going somewhere, right? The tightness, the voluminous, the cleanliness, the elegancy of things. And just I guess another thing is just some feeling of just things being effortless, right? Not in terms of the execution or the mastery, like spending 20 years and then it feels like a person is doing it effortlessly. No, it just the overall feeling in here is just that there was less thought put into that than it might seem, right? There's just something else that is working here, and it's not exactly a thought. There's just some kind of magic taking place.